Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 314, and my next guest hasn't been on the show since episode 230, where we talked about the empathetic lawyer. So I want to bring back James Tedford, and we're going to talk about a lot of the things that have changed in the law, if any, and especially after COVID and what he's doing to continue his mission of being an empathetic lawyer. So welcome, Ted, and thanks for being here.
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We talked off air about, your last couple of cases have just kept you in court forever. And
Yeah,
I mean, is that typical?
unfortunately, it is. Depending on the type of case, obviously, and the venue. This last case that I've been working on is a murder case. It's in juvenile court, so there's no jury. It's just in front of a judge, and unfortunately, because it's in juvenile court, the minor is not entitled to what's called a continuous trial. So we get hodgepodge, 6 hours here, 4 hours there, and it's been going on for well over a month now, with hopefully a couple of weeks to go.
Yeah, I just spoke to a lawyer in a military lawyer in Tacoma, and he was saying that cases that involve kids just drain him so bad. He just doesn't want to do anything with children anymore. And I see, you post sometimes. I've been on this case for 6 weeks, or months, and that's got to be draining.
It is. I mean, all the while you got other cases that are moving along, and you got to try and keep up with them and make sure that those clients are protected, and while at the same time staying focused on the ball.
That's more of a criminal case, or is that a person?
Yeah, this is a criminal case. So it's interesting. Juvenile court in California, anyway, is considered to be what we call quasi-criminal, but it's criminal. You don't have the same protections that an adult would have, so no right to a jury trial. Um, More importantly, the punishments are different. And so in this particular case, my minor was a 15-year-old passenger in a car with two adults who were in their late 20s and gang members. And the right front passenger got out of the car and shot a opposing gang member in the chest and killed him. And the two minors who were in the back seat, both 15, are charged with murder. So they're looking at potential life, but we call that juvenile life. So they would potentially be housed until they're 25 years old if convicted.
And things like that are on the rise.
Yeah,
It just seems like, as much as we want to bring in more laws, it just seems like there's more crime.
it does and it doesn't. I mean, if you look at the crime statistics, a lot of violent crime is down nationwide. Um, but at the same time, yeah, there's a lot of property crimes and a lot of them are going uh, unpunished. So.
So what do you do in those situations where, that there's gang members? I mean, I think for me dealing with gangs, I don't have gangs, and I'm in Redneck City, Conestoga, Pennsylvania.
Well,
You know,
it's
no
it's
gangs here.
interesting. It's interesting because people don't really realize this, that a lot of these gangs are generational,
Mm.
at least in large urban areas and here in Los Angeles County. Um, this particular gang, which is based out of Compton, has been around for 65 years. And for example, this kid that I'm representing, he's 15 years old, and his father was part of the gang. His uncle was part of the gang. His grandfather was part of the gang. So they're born into it, and it's real hard to extract them from it.
You
And
know,
the way I got this case is really interesting because I got it. I represented his one of his uncles
mm,
about 10 years ago in federal court, who was charged with an assault, and ultimately I got him acquitted, and then he moved out of. I convinced him to move out of the area, and this is what's crazy. So he had moved out to a surrounding suburban area out in Temecula, which is where
mhm.
a bunch of wineries are and things like that. Doing real good. Comes back to visit his brother and gets shot 3 times and almost died. And this happened about 7 years ago. So, and yet the rest of the family still lives in Compton. And, you know, now I'm representing his nephew.
I'm helping another client uh, with his book, and it's called, it's all about generational wealth. But in this situation, generational
This would be
gang,
the opposite.
yeah, you're teaching the next generation how to be as bad as you. Um, and I don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to say the word bad, maybe misunderstood, maybe angry, maybe, against the system.
I think
It's
it's
just what they know. Yeah.
more generational poverty. They get born into a family that doesn't have a lot of education, doesn't have a lot of socioeconomic ability to move forward. And, for a teenage kid, starts hanging out with the 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds, and seems flashy and seems like they have somewhere to go and hang out. And before you know it, they're getting sucked into doing crime.
I know with California they have the law, or maybe it's just a suggestion, where if you steal something, it has to be under a certain value, and so
Yeah, I mean
crime is rampant.
that's been slightly misrepresented across the country and in the news.
Hmm.
Uh, Reality is $900 is the cutoff. If it's over 900, it's a felony. If it's under 900, it's a misdemeanor. So they're still being charged and they're still being processed through the criminal justice system. They're just not being charged with felonies unless it's over 900.
Wow. So these
So
cases, I mean, that take you away from your family, and I know that we talked about this before, but as you and I get older, we want to spend more time with our family. So how do you cope with that?
um, I think I do a pretty good job of balancing. You have to compartmentalize, and as much as you want to help and you want to fight for them, you also have to take time out. And so I take trips, but they're shorter trips than what I would like. I would love to be going to Europe for 10 days, but instead I'm going to take a run to the mountains for 2 days and
Hmm.
decompress and then turn around and come back and do it again.
Yeah, but it's hard because we decompress and then we get back into it, and you're like, do I want to be here? But you have got this demeanor, that put the, I think the word I'm looking for is you're a fighter. You fight for other people, regardless of your own personal take, or that you're going to be mentally burned out over this, but you still take on a client because you believe in them.
Well, that's true. And, a lot of people are mistaken when they think that, everybody who's charged with a crime is guilty, or everybody who's charged with a crime is guilty of what they're charged with.
Hmm.
It happens so often that the charges are not necessarily trumped up, but they are escalated and overcharged so that then the prosecution can come in and try and offer a plea bargain to something more reasonable. Um, but every single case is different, and every single case you have to try and tailor some sort of a disposition or a plea bargain to that particular case and that particular defendant.
Well, and I think because your close proximity to Los Angeles, those cases kind of get media attention more than others. So people are getting maybe not the correct information, just what the media wants to share.
I think that's true. I mean, I definitely think that's true, and unfortunately, not to get political, but I mean, a lot of the politics have have gotten so dark and use sensational stories, or they see, there's one incident or two incidents that happen, and now all of a sudden they think it's nationwide, and they use that fear to drive voters to the polls.
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
you know
yeah, so there's
it's
a
what.
lot of misinformation when it comes to what's happening in the criminal justice system.
And so how do you besides books and social media and maybe making a video or two, how do you help squash some of that media misinformation?
I mean, it's very difficult to do from where I sit because I don't feel like those media sensationalistic sort of approaches to what's going on necessarily have a huge impact on what I'm doing, unless you're going to jury trial. Now we're dealing with the public, and now we're dealing with public perception. So one of the things you have to do, especially in a jury trial, is to make sure during voir dire or jury selection, make sure that you really educate the jurors on what the case is about, and really dig deep into the questioning to try and get a sense of where they feel in here, um, which may be driven by a lot of that media and misinformation. So it
Right.
can be very difficult. It's
You know,
challenging.
I think this is where people get a little mis misinformation is especially when it comes to jury selection. They look at movies, they look at
Yeah.
yeah, TV where jury selection takes 5 minutes, or it's comical like My Cousin Vinny, and it's not
Well,
like
it's
that.
funny because yeah, I mean, I do like to watch certain types of legal dramas, but it's very difficult for me, and I have to suspend belief most of the time because, unfortunately, nothing in our justice system uh, happens in 60 minutes. And so, most of the time you see a trial going on, and they skip right over jury selection. They just walk into the court and there's a jury sitting in the box, and then they give their opening statement, which is supposed to be a statement about what you expect the evidence to be, but that's kind of boring,
Mhm.
right? It's not sensationalistic, it's not argument. And yet, for example, I mean, if you try and watch a Suits episode and you're a real lawyer, it's comical, all right, but not in the same way that it is to the people watching,
No, I
because it's
watched a
just
couple
not like
episodes
that
of
for
Suits, and I'm thinking, "It can't be right. I know I wrote an article about that. That's not right." It's like
well, and then one of my other favorites is in all these legal dramas, you'll see the defendant who's charged with murder sitting in the judge's chambers with the prosecutor and the judge and their defense attorney having an adult conversation. That never happens. Zero times does that happen. No judge would allow a defendant in their chambers. No prosecutor can sit down with the charged or accused and have a conversation, nor would they.
mhm.
So it's just sometimes very amusing. And as I said, I have to suspend my belief. So I tend to focus more on the investigation shows. I find those more intriguing. The mysteries or the thrillers, and what's going to be the twist at the end,
Now
rather than the
do you
court
get
drama.
into your own investigations? Do you have to go out there and sleuth
Absolutely,
things out?
100%. One of the things that I think is really important early on in the case is I go to wherever the scene is and I walk it, and then that way I can engage an investigator and have them do certain investigation regarding, what are there videos, are there witnesses, take pictures from this angle, take video from this angle, show me what that witness who's saying they saw everything, what did they actually see? And a lot of times you can't just do it by video, so you got to go there first and get a really good idea of what's going on. And so I try to do that in every case, especially ones that where it makes sense.
I like your approach, and I know not every lawyer does that. Not every lawyer will go and investigate. At least you take the time to do that. And I think it's just one extra thing that you do as an attorney. Now, you know, I've spoken to other attorneys. They say, "Oh, we don't do that. We just hire an investigative team." Well,
Yeah,
yes, but then
and
you're
I
going
do.
to
I
the
do the
court.
same thing, but like I said, I like to do I call myself the advanced patrol,
Mhm.
and I think it's important for me to get the feel, the flavor, the
Right.
smells, the sights,
Well, then
and
you're going to
figure
defend the
out
case better because now you have the information not only ingrained because you went out there and took a look at it, but you're not getting it secondhand from an investigative team.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So in the last year and a half since our last episode and also in the last year since the book came out, what are some of the cases that have really intrigued you?
Hmm. Cases generally in the media,
Well,
or my
not what it could be in the media, it could be the ones you defended, it could be, ones that maybe, a colleague defended that you thought was, you know, pretty interesting.
yeah. I think I did a trial about 6 months ago in federal court with a client who is, and this is such a hot topic right now. Um, he was a hobbyist when it came to making guns. And a lot of people don't realize that under the federal statutes, there is no prohibition, there is nothing illegal about manufacturing your own weapon. And in this particular case, he was making AR style pistols and long guns, and he would purchase the blocks, if you will, of metal and plastic, and they would send with them templates, and he would use a jigsaw in his backyard and file and put them together, and they looked very, very professional. Um, Now, this guy was in his mid 30s and was a armed guard for a very, very popular armed guard service that banks employ all the time, and perfect record, no criminal history. But he had two brothers who were gang members,
Mhm.
and those brothers got involved in a conspiracy to sell methamphetamine and later firearms to an undercover confidential informant who was working on behalf of the government, being paid by the government. She she was so much embedded with these two brothers that one of the brothers believed he was boyfriend and girlfriend with her, and he even made allegations that he had had sex with her.
Wow.
Um, but she kept asking and asking for more AR style because these two guys would go steal handguns or whatever and sell her a Smith and Wesson 38, um, and sell her methamphetamine. And they then started calling their brother, saying, "Dude, my girlfriend is looking for this AR style. I know you can make them for me. Can you please make me two of these weapons, and she'll pay us X, and you'll make $100 on the deal." And after about 3 months of them pushing, he finally uh, broke down and made a couple for his brothers, but they in turn sold them to the undercover. And by the way, I should mention there's big business in being an undercover confidential informant. This woman has made almost $1 million in the last 20 years, paid by the U.S. government. Never had to pay one penny of tax on it, and has never held a regular job. And it's alarming in my opinion. Anyway, so he breaks down, sells the weapons, and then a few weeks later, they come back and say they need more. Um, About 2 weeks after that, they're all arrested, and my client's charged with conspiracy to manufacture and distribute firearms. Did he do it? Yeah, I mean, he did.
Yeah.
Technically, he could make them for himself legally, but once you start portraying yourself as being in the business of, then you need to have a federal firearm license.
Hmm.
And he didn't have one, and so we went to trial, and he lost, uh, which we knew he would. Uh, but we wanted to tell his story. He was adamant that it be explained how this all went down and how it occurred. And anyway, so I found that one to be a really interesting story because the Second Amendment is such a hot issue in this country right now, and there's so many people on both sides. Right, we have to restrict weapons. We have restrictions on weapons, but at the same time, our Supreme Court is rolling back those restrictions with recent decisions and saying, "Hey, nope, Second Amendment's more important. Everybody should be able to have an assault rifle."
Oh, yeah. Well, they misinterpret also the size and scope of the weapon that you're supposed to be,
Well,
using.
there's the problem, yeah, and the bigger problem is there's no definitive parameters. So,
Right.
for example, um, the Federal Firearms Act has not been updated since the '60s, and so try as a just as a citizen trying to figure out what can I legally have, what can I legally do, um, is very, very what's the word, subjective, and it really comes down to the agents. It comes down to the ATF because they're allowed to issue policy statements that now create the interpretations of a statute that was created in the '60s.
Hmm.
Yet Congress could step in and make these definitions. Congress could pass laws that
Hmm.
say this is exactly what we can have and this is exactly what we can't have.
Right.
But too politically unacceptable, right?
And then it goes back again to the media. They,
Yeah.
they say, well, that's an assault rifle. Can you can you
Well,
define that?
and like I said, I've handled many assault rifle cases,
Hmm.
both in federal and state court. Of course, they're very different depending on what state you're in versus if it's federal jurisdiction. And
Hmm.
what I can tell you, only at the federal level, there's just no good definitions,
Right.
and everybody refuses to actually define them.
Yeah.
So
And we've been talking about criminal stuff for a while. Let's switch to personal injury, and you do a lot of that as well. And
I
and
do.
I had shared with you, I guess, a week or so ago about Tesla. And Tesla is one of those hot cars that everybody wants.
Everybody wants a
I
Tesla
don't I
until
don't want one.
until it bursts into a ball of flames, right?
Right. Yeah, and the article I sent you was it took hundreds of thousands of gallons to put this Tesla fire out. And I thought to myself, if something like that gets so hot, the person's not going to be able to escape. They're going to die. Just and granted, they're going to argue the point where a gas-powered car is getting accidents as well. And Elon Musk has come out and said our cars are safer based on numbers than. I don't think so.
Yeah, well, then you get to statistics, and then you have to compare, um, make a cost benefit analysis, I guess. And being that he's in the electric car industry, his big argument obviously is the environment and the
Yeah.
less impact. But
Oh, it's less
uh,
impact unless it catches on fire.
unless it catches on fire, and you're the one who paid the money to have that expensive car.
Yeah, but you know, in your state, I think there's more Teslas than any other state. California and Florida, I think, are the big Tesla users. But the accidents that are happening with these cars, the
So
autonomous driving
problematic.
is just horrible.
It's so problematic. We do have, I mean, you can't drive 50 yards without seeing a Tesla. many of them are being misused. They are not paying attention. They're letting the car drive,
Hmm.
and I think well, it's easily proven that when the driver is not in control of the vehicle cannot respond quickly.
Yeah,
It
and
just
and and then the new Cybertruck, where it's this shiny stainless steel thing that blinds the crap out of people when it drives by, and I'm like, how is
I
that
don't
not a safety concern?
I don't know, and it seems to me I haven't been inside one yet, so I must admit I don't know, but from the outside, it doesn't look like you have a lot of visibility. It doesn't look well, it just doesn't look good to me. But
No, no,
it's
no. It
personal
just,
taste.
but
They look like missiles coming down the street.
they have articles I've been reading about Teslas running into cars and people and elderly and you know it's like, okay, what's going on? Why? I mean, and I'm sure that the courts are filled with these types of cases, but
Sure.
you know, and I know you, and you'll probably want to defend all of them. So how do you pick and choose?
You mean on a some like an injury case?
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
pick and choose
Well,
which ones are going to be priority?
I mean, the typical response is going to be how has it impacted the client, right? What type of injuries? How severe are those injuries? And the more severe the injury, obviously, the more value the case has, and that's going to drive a lot more uh, back and forth with the insurance carrier because I mean, I think this is the biggest thing that people don't get. Insurance carriers are not the good hands people. They're not the cute little gecko. They're investment companies that want to make money and show returns.
Mhm.
And so they're not there to help you when you're the one that's been injured by another party and they're representing the other party. They're gonna tighten up that checkbook and they're gonna fight you
Mhm.
all the way.
Yeah.
And people have the perception that when people get injured and they have to ultimately sue, uh, that it's just the lottery, and it's not.
Right.
It is not the lottery. These are people that have been injured, and to get to the point where their case is going to trial, it's a very small percentage of cases, and it's usually because the insurance carrier is just not taking responsibility and not doing what they should be doing.
Yeah. I talked to you about our case back in May where we were on vacation and another person out of state was on vacation and ran into my son's car, destroying it. And then we discovered that the person driving was excluded from the insurance. And so there's a couple reasons why he could have been excluded. I'm thinking, DUIs in the past or just lousy driving to begin with, but their
Yep,
insurance refused to pay any of it. And
yep.
the state goes
Because
after
it's
them.
a contract, right? And the contract is with the person that owns the car.
And the thing is I look back over some of my old policies. And I didn't see any of those exclusions. Insurance agents never used to ask about those exclusions up until a few years ago, and then they wanna exclude people, and it's probably, ultimately, the way they're gonna weasel out of paying.
Correct. It happens quite a bit. Another issue we have, at least in California, is the limited liability that one's required to carry is only $15,000, and you can't even go to the hospital and get treatment after an accident and
Right.
get compensated for $15,000. Isn't going to cover it.
No,
Um,
and even the roadside, emergency the EMTs that show up when you're in an accident, even if you're okay, a lot of times exceed $15,000.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially you get transported in an ambulance to the hospital and they have to do any kind of diagnostic testing, you're gonna be up in the $15,000 range very, very quick. And so what I tell all my clients here, and I really educate them, is on carrying larger limits of uninsured motorists because you have to protect yourself, even though the state requires 15,000, that's the minimum.
Right.
And And then people go, well, can't we just sue the individual driver who hit us? And here's the problem: most of those people are judgment proof. If they don't have the money to pay for a higher liability policy than a $15,000 policy, you really think they're going to have $100,000 sitting in the bank where
Right.
they're going to own property? They're not. And so I tell people to get higher limits of uninsured motorists and protect yourself, because that way, if they're either not insured or they're underinsured, you can still get compensated if you're hurt.
Yeah, that's what we did. We had the higher policy, and it ended up paying for, you know, any injuries or hospital bills. But,
Yep.
it's just, okay, now my insurance is probably gonna go up, you know? But
Shouldn't, but it
at least I
probably
was
will.
covered.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I can't tell you how many people I have to sit down and explain to them, "Hey, I know you were injured, but the other side has no insurance. They don't own anything, and we can sue them, but it's gonna cost about $100,000 to get this thing all the way to the point where you get a judgment,
yeah,
and it's gonna be worthless. You're
yeah,
never gonna see a penny."
yeah.
So,
And I know that, in California, there's a lot of uninsured drivers, and that's gotta
sure.
be a problem.
Yep, definitely,
We
definitely.
talked about the subpoenaing or summoning somebody's people that, you want to bring them to court, but they're not gonna show up.
Yeah, I mean, that's typically more of an issue in civil cases and personal injury cases. If somebody, especially if they're out of state, there's no jurisdiction, you're going to have a hard time getting them into trial. As I was telling you, I mean, during COVID, at least we could put them on Zoom and people would feel like, okay, I'll do that. I'll appear in court via Zoom from Virginia to California. But, um, now you'd have to pay for their transportation. You got to get them across the country
Yeah,
and into court. And they'll just ignore it. They'll
yeah,
just
and
ignore it.
some of these court systems are still very archaic. They're paying 5 cents a mile, and I'm like, "What is
I
that?"
know. I know.
You know,
I know.
you gotta go 1,000 miles just to make, $50. It's not worth anybody's time.
No, or if they're just a witness to something, they're not going to get paid anything. So they have no incentive.
Yeah, so, what do you do on a typical day? And I know that a lot of lawyers just sit in their office, but I've seen you the
I'm
stuff
I'm
that you
rarely
do.
rarely just sitting in my office. Most of the time, because I do a combination of criminal and personal injury. Um, in the mornings, I'm on my way to court. Criminal court appearances are required.
Mhm.
The defendants are required to appear with you, and so that's typically what's happening. At least the
Yeah, you
first
keep
half of the day.
yeah, you keep
And then
busy.
then
Yeah,
you get to the office, and then I can sit at the office and direct and talk on the phone and meet clients and draft motions and
do
draft discovery
podcasts.
and do podcasts. Yeah.
But I was gonna say that, you and your wife enjoy going out to sports events, and I've seen your pictures, and, do you ever see some of the people that you've defended at these events?
Um, I've taken some of the people that I've defended to the events. It's
That's cool.
actually,
How many
yeah. I
lawyers
mean,
do that? None.
I don't know, but yeah, I have. I really, as you said, I enjoy sports. I have season tickets to a couple different professional sports teams, and I go on a regular basis. And if I can't use the tickets, I typically don't just resell them. I'll give them to clients or employees, and if I can go, I'll go with them
Mhm.
and show them the experience and try to get them into that sport.
And I like that because, and as you know, I'm a big fan of Disney, and it's not just because of the parks. It's about the experience. And so
Right.
whenever I hear someone that wants to share that experience with some others, that to me makes them a better person. It's not about money, it's not about, you know you know, some gratification that you're just giving somebody. No, you're giving them an experience.
Yeah, and it's always good to see people in a different environment, a more relaxed environment. You get to know them better, you get to understand them better, and I think it helps ultimately in how you represent them.
Yeah.
I just think the idea of sitting down with somebody and outside of the professional court system or what have you is so important so that they can relax, let down their guard, and you can really get to know people that way.
So how do people find you? Where do they go? I mean, I know you're in Pasadena, but, do they go to a website? Do they give you a call?
They can do any of that. They can type my name in to Google, and it's going to come up. The website's there, tedfordlaw.com, and I'm always going to make myself available to talk to people if they are in need. And otherwise, it's a lot of word of mouth. I've been doing it for such a long time now that, even yesterday I got a call from one of my childhood friends who has a coworker that needs help. And that's kind of where my clients come from,
Mhm.
all over the place.
And so if you're in Pasadena, and you have a personal injury case or a criminal case and you need representation, please look up Ted Tedford at tedfordlaw.com, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.